Let's jump right into this explainer, because we need to confront a massive illusion. We've all been fed these polished, glittering fairy tales that make the past look so clean and simple. Pop culture has entirely sanitized our history and our myths, but today, we're ripping the Band-Aid off. We're gonna dive into the gritty, fascinating, and honestly sometimes terrifying reality underneath all that polish.
I mean, we all love Hollywood's version, right? You've got glamorous gods tossing lightning bolts with perfect morality, chivalrous knights riding through spotless courtyards, polite queens delicately sipping tea. But the historical reality is a whole different beast. The real stories of existence, whether you're a peasant, a queen, or literally an immortal god, are actually messy, painful battles of human endurance. It's full of chaotic divines, disease-ridden streets, and brutal, unapologetic ambition.
So, to unpack this, we're going to look at the myth of perfection, our dysfunctional divines, the brutal medieval reality, queens of ambition and mystery, Frida Kahlo's beautiful pain, and finally, the enduring human spirit.
Let's start with those dysfunctional divines and get an unfiltered look at Mount Olympus.
When you strip away the majesty, you really start to see who these gods truly were. Take Zeus. Sure, he's the god of the sky and order, but his actual day-to-day behavior? The guy is a walking HR nightmare with absolutely zero personal boundaries, literally transforming into animals just to seduce mortals. Then there's Hera, the goddess of marriage. Her own marriage was a complete disaster, and she spent her time punishing Zeus's victims rather than holding her husband accountable. And Hades? Pop culture loves to make him the ultimate villain, but in reality, he was basically just a tired, quiet middle manager of the dead, stuck doing customer service for eternity.
And the deeper you look, the messier it gets. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, literally sparked the Trojan War just to win a divine beauty contest over a golden apple. Demeter? She completely shut down global agriculture, causing a massive famine just to emotionally blackmail Zeus into returning her daughter. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, victim-blamed and cursed Medusa after Poseidon defiled her sacred temple. And Ares was such a chaotic, violent brute that even his own father, Zeus, called him the most hateful of all the gods. You see, these deities weren't perfect moral compasses at all. They were flawed, vindictive reflections of humanity's own darkest impulses.
Now let's leave the heavens and get into the dirt with the brutal medieval reality and what it took to just survive the 14th century. A typical medieval morning routine brilliantly illustrates why you, or I, wouldn't last a single day back then. Imagine waking up freezing, sharing a rotting, flea-ridden straw mattress with your entire family and probably some livestock. Then, since there's zero plumbing, you relieve yourself in a bucket, shout Gardaloo, and chuck it right out your window into the open sewer of the street. Breakfast? Well, you're drinking weak ale because the water is teeming with deadly parasites, and you're chewing on rock-hard pottage bread that might literally be bulked up with sawdust or clay. Every single morning was just a humiliating, freezing, nauseating endurance test.
And heaven forbid you actually get sick. Medieval medicine was basically polite torture. Doctors firmly believed your body was governed by 4 humors. So if you had a fever, it just meant you had too much blood. The logical solution? Bleeding you out with dull blades or leeches. Got a toothache? No dentist for you. Your local barber surgeon would just rip the tooth out with iron pliers by candlelight. No anesthesia, obviously. If the disease didn't take you out, the cure, cooked up way before antibiotics or germ theory, almost certainly would.
So when we pull back the curtain on that chivalric fantasy of feasts and romantic quests, we see a really stark contrast. The peasant reality, which, keep in mind, was the reality for 90% of the population, meant working from sunup to sundown, having rotting teeth by age 20, and potentially dying from something as minor as an infected splinter or a bad harvest. A staggering number of people didn't even make it past age 5. So making it to 40, that made you a statistical miracle.
Moving on to our masters of fate, queens of ambition and mystery.
To truly appreciate their triumphs, we really need to understand the historical trap these women were born into. Young girls were often betrothed as early as 12 years old. They were treated primarily as property or just political bargaining chips. Childbirth was a frequent, agonizing death lottery with zero medical intervention. And above all else, they are expected to suffer in complete silence. If they complained or showed even a hint of independence, they risked being accused of witchcraft. But against this incredibly grim backdrop of subjugation, certain figures rise up and absolutely shatter the mold.
Let's look at a wild discovery made deep in the Palenque jungle in southern Mexico. Archaeologists uncovered a hidden tomb containing a woman known only as the Red Queen. Why the Red Queen? Because her entire tomb and her skeleton were completely drenched in cinnabar. Now, cinnabar is a highly toxic, brilliant red mercury sulfide. The ancient Maya used it ceremonially to symbolize blood, rebirth, and a divine life force. Covering her in this incredibly dangerous, potent powder proves she wasn't just some silent wife. She was a cosmically powerful figure who mattered immensely.
And where they found her is what truly tells the story. The Red Queen was interred inside a pyramid right beside Pakal the Great, the most famous of all Maya kings. She was even wearing a stunning jade death mask. In a society where your burial location absolutely mirrored the cosmic order, being placed right next to the mighty king was no accident. She represented the moon to his sun, showing this powerful dual cosmic partnership rather than just male domination. It's solid proof that Maya women acted as vital, powerful equals in these ruling dynasties.
Shifting gears from the ancient Maya to 18th century Russia, we meet another master of her own fate, Catherine the Great. Born an obscure German princess named Sophie, she was brought to Russia specifically to be a pliable, easily controlled bride for the very immature Grand Duke Peter. But she completely flipped the script. She learned the Russian language, immersed herself in Orthodox rituals, and read Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire. So when her husband became czar and immediately started ruining the country, Catherine didn't just sit back and suffer in silence. She used her razor-sharp intelligence to survive a literal viper's nest of a court and orchestrated a brilliant, bloodless coup to steal the empire entirely on her own terms.
200,000. Think about that number for a second. That is the number of square miles Catherine added to the Russian Empire during her reign. She didn't just hold on to the throne, she massively expanded it. Conquering Crimea and parts of Poland, she proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was a ruthless, expanding force who knocked down the walls of Europe. She ruled with an iron hand and unmatched intellectual brilliance in a world that absolutely did not want a woman in charge.
Next up, we have Frida Kahlo's Beautiful Pain, Painting the Broken Self.
When you look at her timeline, it's honestly a path of non-stop agony. At age 6, she contracts polio. In 1925, at just 18 years old, she's impelled by an iron handrail in a horrific bus crash that completely shatters her spine and pelvis. Yet she flat out refused to let this defeat her. She just started painting right from her bed. By 1939, she's exhibiting her fiercely original work in Paris. And my absolute favorite story, in 1953, her doctors told her she was way too sick to attend her very first solo exhibition in Mexico. Her response? She arrived at the gallery in an ambulance, had herself carried in on a hospital bed, and spent the evening greeting guests with tequila and laughter.
Frida once captured her own essence perfectly. She said, "I paint myself because I am so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." Encased in rigid plaster body casts, constantly fighting her own deteriorating body, she actually used a mirror rigged above her bed to make her paint the canvas. She unapologetically refused to sanitize her suffering. She painted her fractured spine and bleeding heart with absolute breathtaking honesty. And she flat out rejected the surrealist label that European artists kept trying to force on her. She told them she didn't paint dreams, she painted her own unvarnished reality. By leaning into her brokenness, her queerness, her fierce politics, and the true grit of her Mexican heritage, she created this incredible visual autobiography of survival. She managed to turn her personal trauma into a global symbol of defiance that still resonates with millions of people today.
Let's bring this all together with the enduring human spirit, surviving the unsanitized world.
When you pull back and look at the true thread of history, it becomes crystal clear. Our gods? They're really just flawed reflections of our own messy humanity. Everyday life for most of human history required surviving unspeakable disease, absolute filth, and grueling labor. And true legacy is built by those who completely defy the sanitized, polite roles forced upon them. From Demeter shutting down the world for her daughter, to the Red Queen's toxic burial, to Catherine stealing an empire, right up to Frida Kahlo painting Long Live Life on her deathbed, we see that greatness is always forged in the raw fire of reality.
I'm going to leave you with a provocative thought. If the sanitized fairy tale versions of history are really just comfortable illusions, what other harsh, beautiful truths are we hiding from ourselves? Once we stop demanding perfection and polish from our past, we can finally appreciate the terrifying, beautiful endurance it takes just to be human. Keep digging for the unvarnished truth, and thanks so much for exploring this with me.